Since President Donald Trump's election in November of 2016, violence and threats of violence have steadily increased against President Donald Trump, his family, his administration, and his supporters. Rep. Maxine Waters, California D. opened the floodgates, with her calls for violence and public harassment against Trump officials and supporters. And now, it seems it is not safe to wear your MAGA hat out in public. But what about President Trump himself? In his first 6 months in office, threats against President Trump were tracking on average at about 6 to 8 a day, according to U.S. Secret Service Director Randolph Texales. On average, this was about the same number of threats made against former Presidents Obama and George W. Bush while they were in office. However, as the Trump presidency has progressed, the threat level has increased to a significant degree. The threats include emails, social media postings, suspicious statements, and various others. All threats against a president or a protectee are investigated by the Secret Service, said Ailes, although he said many individuals later walk back their threatening statements or the threats are found to lack serious intent. Others are referred to the U.S. Attorney for prosecution. When not referring to President Trump as racist or calling him Hitler or his supporters as Nazis as a means to demonize and dehumanize, leftist progressives and Democrats with the assistance of the mainstream establishment media decry calls for civility in American politics. In fact, in many instances, they cover up, ignore, downplay, or straight up approve of the wave of violence and public harassment we are seeing against President Trump himself, his family, administration, and his supporters. Tensions have reached an all-time high among the left as Democrat leaders and their supporters as they call for open season on all things Trump, the president himself included. His detractors will stop at nothing and the media is only fomenting, encouraging, excusing, and hoping for more, as they blame President Trump for a mass murder he had nothing to do with at a local newspaper and a 16-year-old boy is assaulted for simply wearing a hat proclaiming the message, "Make America Great Again." This, of course, is a form of harassment because it incites and justifies mob violence. And while the media openly encourage this violence, all things Trump, the media campaign to disarm us, to take away our Second Amendment right to defend ourselves. It appears his detractors will stop at nothing. As a result, special arrangements are being made for the President and First Lady for their upcoming trip to the United Kingdom. Ahead of his visit to Scottish Turnberry, a dedicated intensive care room is being prepared at a Glasgow hospital in Scotland for President Trump in case of an assassination attempt. According to the Scottish Sun, the president will meet the Queen down south, but a room is being kept aside for him up north should he fall ill or an attempt on his life be made. The president and First Lady Melania are set to fly into Prestwick Airport on Friday for the private leg of his UK trip. Mr. Trump will meet the Queen and current thinking is that he will stay at Turnberry during his time here. And the Evening Times reports that a room in the ICU of the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital has been kept open in the event of the U.S. president falling ill or an attempt on his life. It is understood the room is not intended to be used unless absolutely necessary over the course of the visit. A Queen Elizabeth University Hospital spokeswoman said, "We are not sitting with an empty room waiting if he takes unwell and needs intensive care. It may be that as part of an arrangement we would say we would put it in that room." The health board explained, however, that the room will be used if intensive care therapy is needed for a patient. A multidisciplinary team with members from the Scottish government will visit the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to oversee plans for Trump's visit. A Scottish government spokesman said, "President Trump is coming to the UK at the invitation of the UK government." However, the Scottish government has been planning for some time with key partners, including Police Scotland, for the possibility of the president's itinerary including a visit to Scotland. Scotland has deep and long-standing ties of family, friendship and business with the United States, which will continue to endure. At the same time, we will not compromise our fundamental values of equality, diversity, and human rights, and we expect these values to be made clear during the presidential visit to the UK. We would encourage those attending any protests to do so peacefully and safely. We told you how Scots cops face a major headache securing the perimeter of Turnberry during President Trump's visit.